All right. So,
Okay.
another just reminder that and for every, all of you for being registered, we're donating $1 per registered person. So not like I said earlier, to Deaf Kids Code. So thank you all for being here because you're doing good and learning. So with that, I am going to bring our next speaker back in. Hopefully you heard some really great things from her. So we're bringing Abby back to the stage. Hello, Abby. You're back. To talk about customized internal platforms without building from scratch.
And I have to say one thing. It's funny, when I was at Platform Engineering Day, one of the main talks is actually from our closing keynote later, from NatWest, the bank, and Chris was talking about when he was first trying to get on the platform engineering. And I'm not going to ruin any slides for him because he doesn't have any slides. It's far sidetrack. But when he was talking about how he was getting into it and all the research he was doing, he's like, I watched a lot of videos. And then he clicked a button and all of these pictures of Abby came up. He's like, I watched a lot of videos of Abby talking about this. And I'm just saying, Abby has been so influential in educating the community and getting this stuff with the CNCF and with working groups and getting all of this stuff and all the hats you wear. And we really appreciate all that. But Chris wasn't wrong, because when I was researching for this conference, I clicked on as much information I could find, and half of them came up with links pointing to you and the videos that you've created. So I've also watched 2001 Abby Bangser videos, and they were all a pleasure, and I've learned so much from you. So I'm excited that our community here gets to learn from you, and thank you for being a Cube Crash alum and for joining us for an additional Cube Crash.
Oh, thank you so much. I always really appreciate the kind words, and then also I'm like, set the bar low, friend. But we'll see. We've got demos, we've got chats. It'll be fun.
I didn't even set it high enough.
I appreciate that.
Well, with that, we will duck out and hand it over to you, Abby.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I feel like it's a bit strange now to be solo here, but I think I was laughing a bit during the panel because a lot of what we just talked about is actually going to come up. And I almost wish I had more time to make sure the words actually matched between talks, but I will share where it comes. So let me share my screen here quickly. And so hopefully everyone can start to see my slides. I think I see them there. So what I'm going to be talking about today is exactly what Already said, which is that you don't build from scratch, you build from legacy. And I think that we need to talk about what it looks like to be building platforms in a world where you have existing business value and existing technology, and what that looks like in this platform engineering space rather than just quick starts. The reason is to quote now Charity from the last one. Let's see, there we go. Organizations are in a constant state of migration. So Charity said, if you're not migrating, you're dying. And I think that I'm proud to say that every organization I've been a part of was always migrating. And I think a lot of people that will resonate with them. The thing about these migrations is it's not just that you're migrating, it's that you're often overlapping many, many migrations in time because they all have a very long tail to them, or often you will find that they have a long tail. And what you end up with is QXKCD, this idea of these different standards. And this comic is often about the standards in public, in the world, in the industry. But I think it relies as well, or relates as well, to internal standards. You have different languages you write in because there's been different waves of popularity of those languages. You have different compute that you work with because what was virtual machines to start with became containers, became serverless, became WASM. You have different sizes. You have the monolith, the microservice, the distributed monolith, and probably everything in between. So what you end up with is the need to support a lot of different standards, even internal to a single organization. And yet we keep trying to find that next silver bullet. I mean, I'm a technologist, just like I'm sure many of you on the call today, and I do love seeing all of the new tech that comes out. And every time something new and exciting comes out, I want to play with it. I want to jump in, I want to try that code out, and I want to see it make a change in what I'm doing and how I'm working. We're excited about this stuff. It's moving quickly in this industry. if you look at some of the tools that are popular in platform engineering, these are all kind of screenshots. We have tools telling us that it can integrate with everything, all your other tools. Because I don't know about you, I only use these 7 tools, in my organization. Probably unlikely that that's all of my tools that it's integrating with. I see things like everything an enterprise needs in a single app platform. And that again, I think about even smaller organizations I've been a part of and how I've needed to use a number of different app platforms to support that organization. Deploy all of your apps seamlessly with zero configuration. I mean, come on now. This I would love to see. I've been fighting with Circle CI for the last week. Let's get to the zero configuration right away if possible. All of your developer routines in one place. We can't decide between VS Code and Vim and JetBrains. How am I supposed to get all my developer things into one location? And of course, consistently apply your process across your whole business. All of these are promises that come on some really great products that I think really highly of around the industry, but they all also get sold as silver bullet solutions. So before I sound like an old lady on my rocking chair telling you to get off my lawn, I just want to be clear that my concern is not with new things. We need to continue growing. If we aren't moving forward, we're moving backwards. So we need new things. My concern isn't even with this idea of a silver bullet that can fundamentally change how we think about things. Again, that is how we've come around in this industry to the step changes we've seen throughout the years. There can be silver bullets and they can make huge differences in our organizations. I mean, if I'm being honest, this one's from our website, so I'm right there with the best of them, right? We talked about marketing and sales. Consistently codify your business. This is a step change that we want to see in the industry, and we can see with the products. What I worry about with the trend towards these silver bullet conversations is the idea of focusing on the quick start and not acknowledging and not preparing people for the long tail with the way that our products are built, with the way that we onboard people into the products that we're building, and just how platform engineering is focused on, for example, quick start a new application. It's not focused, the conversations and all the blogs I'm seeing are not focused on how to migrate applications or how to upgrade applications or how to roll out security patches. Every quick start I'm seeing is how do you create a new application and how often does that really happen in your organization? So, just to be clear, we as an industry and we as platform engineers need to crave new. We need to strive for better or else we will continue to stay stuck in the mud. And we need to design revolutionary improvements so that we can reduce our load on the internal costs of an organization and spend more and more of our energy on the business differentiating side of our businesses. This is where we want to be. So what does revolutionary mean when it comes to platform engineering? With this, I'm going to actually lean on the community. So this is the CNCF platform engineering maturity model that I'll introduce. Yes, I'm a co-lead of this group, but we had over 50 people participate in moving this from a model that I helped to initialize and into this community owned and community driven outcome. And so this is the screenshot. This is the model. The QR code there on the screen is the website in order to see the kind of 12-page document that goes along with this, because there's a lot of nuance to these aspects. And so to give the lay of the land, the model has the kind of row and column that you maybe have seen before in maturity models, and it has these aspects in the rows, and these aspects are in how do you invest in your platform, drive adoption, design interfaces, manage operations, and make sure to build measurement into your feedback loop. What I find really powerful, and this was an evolution within the community effort, was the naming of these columns or these levels, because they help people to realize where they need to be, not just tell people if you're not the highest level, you are a failure. You must get to highest level because this is a maturity model and that's what you do. What these describe is where you need to be for your size organization and for the number of users that you have on your platform and what is expected of that platform. Is it scaling? Is it operable? And so on. One of the key things to call out is that within this, each of these kind of rows can move across the columns independently, and they should be based on those company needs. So an investment into, for example, how you do interfaces at your organization doesn't necessarily mean you have to simultaneously be investing in adoption. And often you can't be doing too many of these at once because they are expensive to invest in, and you have to kind of move as you go in your organization. So the last thing to call out about this model is the fact that it does lay out that North Star. It does lay out that revolutionary difference in people, and it challenges a lot of people to think about where they are and what they're doing and whether or not they need that step change difference. And that North Star is this idea that you're not building an operational set of offerings, but you're creating an ecosystem that has participatory experience with both users and producers of those services in your platform, that's integrated into how your users work and is completely managed so users don't have to think about how to long term support the infrastructure and tools they depend on. And of course, that this is all being built with monitoring and observability in mind, both from the technical and product level. So, where are we actually today as an industry? We have calls in the CNCF working group on about a fortnightly basis. And we often get end users coming in and talking about their experiences. And what we're finding is that most people self evaluate somewhere between provisional and operational. Yes, there'll be maybe some differences here, and some might scoot up the chart a bit, but I'd say the average lands somewhere here. And to get from here to that to the next level or the optimizing level can feel like a big stretch. And I want to call out a couple of them in particular that I think without reading that 12-page paper, it might not feel as big of a stretch as maybe it can be. So the first one I'm going to call out is with interfaces. I think a lot of the industry, the average part of the industry, is somewhere between custom processes and standard tooling. They're somewhere between sort of people try and talk to each other and find examples around the org and having really good examples of templated code. So infrastructure as code using different tools. That would be standardizing how they're doing things. But templates is not the same thing as integration into where people are working. Integration into their integrated development environments or IDEs, integration into their continuous integration and deployment pipelines, integration into how they work, because it's taking it and we're handing things off to them. And so it's standardization of how they get started, not how they use those tools. I'm also going to call out investment because I think, again, the standard that we're seeing around the industry is that there are dedicated teams now to platform engineering. Yes, we can all sort of snicker and acknowledge that sometimes these teams are really a rename from another kind of team name within the organization. But the point is that the organization has invested in engineers to spend time on the problem of standardization and platform building. But to get there, to getting to the point where it's not just that team as a bottleneck for building the platform, but actually they are the ones enabling an ecosystem where people, maybe even non-engineers, people in finance and people in customer service and so on, can add their expertise into the platform and scale that with the organization. That is often a really big stretch. Right now, what we're seeing is a single kind of dedicated team that gets tickets and requests coming in. And the prioritization of that is difficult. And it seems like it's just a hose pipe of information, and people are feeling blocked. What that platform team can and should be able to do is evolve to making that a pluggable ecosystem where they're scaling expertise wherever possible, safely as well, I should say. The last one I'm going to talk about is the one that's really the core of this entire talk, which is that we need to stop building things for day 0 and focus on making sure that day 2 is a part of our plan right from the start. Because there's a heck of a lot more days after initial deployment, which would be considered day 0, than there are deployment days. We're going to have day 2, day 200, and day 2000. So building in the way these platforms work for operability and extensibility is a big part of changing how we choose our tools and how we actually run our platforms. So, hopefully I've made the case that this is a little bit revolutionary for many people, and that we may want to be there. But we realize that many of us are in a different situation. We're in that kind of provisional operational state. And again, not everyone needs to make that leap right away, but it's something to keep an eye on and make sure we are always keeping open to us if our organization requires it, instead of kind of closing doors on that route. So what do we have to do? Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that platform engineers are tired. There is just so much maintenance that is going into the efforts around managing a platform today, managing infrastructure, managing services internally, helping developer teams be more productive and have lower cognitive load. We are shifting that cognitive load around, and it is landing squarely on the shoulders of platform engineers, and it is tiring. So let's acknowledge that. When I say that maintenance is tiring and that it's a large load, what does that look like? One example of a maintenance stitch I know I found myself in many a times is that we as a platform team have spent a lot of time on that standardized tooling. We've created templates, for example, maybe in Terraform code. We've versioned those templates so that we can upgrade them and create a contract with our users. We really tried to invest in something that is a long-term standardization and improvement for the org. And it's been so good with some of our teams. Some of our teams are getting automatic pushes from every time we upgrade. They've set it up in their CI/CD pipeline. They get access to that upgrade. They're on the most recent version, and they're always right there with us. Now, we probably also have some teams that have a pretty good process in place, but they don't get those automatic updates. So they end up usually a couple versions behind. Now, if we poke them on the shoulder and we say, hey, this one's got a security, fix in it, we can usually get them to upgrade fairly quickly. But it is still manual and it is still sort of out of band. Where it really starts to hurt is in this third category. And I know we've all had people that are here, which is that these people have taken your template that you've written and they've gone off and been successful. They've created their new microservice, they've created their new infrastructure, and they've never looked back. They haven't felt a need to. And they're completely detached to all the upgrades that you and your team have done. They're detached from the security upgrades, the performance upgrades, the compliance upgrades. And how is it that you're going to track these people down so that they can get updates? And how is it that you're going to split the effort of doing updates to the infrastructure that Terraform created, right? Maybe it's obvious that as a platform team, you're updating the template, but what happens with the things already running? You can get yourself into a little bit of a hole here for migrations. So if we want to reach those revolutionary improvements, which I do think are attainable, we need to acknowledge that right now maintenance is taking a front seat, that it is tiring for us as platform engineers to make that leap. And we need to find evolutionary steps that we can do while building on legacy existing code and existing processes, because we can't just stop and rewrite all the time. How can we do that? I'd like to suggest that we can use the facade pattern from application engineering here. What is the facade pattern? The facade pattern is about putting an API as the contract between the users and the producers of functionality. So our users now are interacting with an API that has that contract of what fields they can change, what they can request, but actually has no connection to the implementation. All of a sudden, how you choose to implement your infrastructure is completely independent of how your users request it, right? So this is how we get evolutionary improvements. We take the time to put an API in front, making no changes to the implementation, and now we can start to slowly migrate the things that need to be migrated, or completely leave things as they are, but allow ourselves the ability to introduce new tools for new capabilities that are the right tools for the job. Because again, your users don't have to get used to that new tool that you're using. So, if I want to put in a facade today as a platform engineer, what do I need to do? Well, need a few things. Need an API, So that's the thing that's actually your working contract between the users and the producers. I need somewhere for that API to call into. So I need a API server of some sort. And I need that server to actually do business logic implementation or call out to somewhere else that can, right? So these are the things I need to put up that facade and have that ability. Well, we talked about that we have had contract definitions in the past with tools that we use for infrastructure. So a Helm's values file looks an awful lot like a contract. A Terraform module, awful lot like a contract. These are not APIs. These are implementations that have abstractions. Those are different, right? So instead, we need to be thinking about things like CRDs and open API initiatives and other things where your definition of the API is independent of what's behind it. And yes, those have to run somewhere. We need that running API server. And so we can talk about, is that a web app? Is that a serverless backend? Or is that Kubernetes API if you're using something like a CRD? So somehow you need this running software. When we talk about business logic implementation, we're often talking about basically workflows, right? And we see that a lot of times in our platform engineering experience, we reach for the workflow tools we've used for CI/CD, and that's where you might use like a GitHub Actions, Circle CI, something like that. We also see something like an Argo workflows come in, and what we're looking for is how do we start to implement this logic? And sometimes it's just a web app running in the as a controller in Kubernetes or elsewhere. But there is that fourth piece. We talked about how we need to get past the fact of day one or day zero implementation and always be thinking about day two and beyond from the beginning. What happens when we have to take all these pieces, which are often come from different technology implementations, different repositories, and we need to figure out how to maintain and organize them? Are we going to take all those different implementations and technologies and shove them into a mono repo with all that different things, or are we going to keep those separate because they'll make it easier for CI pipelines? I don't know. These are decisions that we need to make because what we're building when we're building APIs is we're building software. That's our platform is software. So, question I like to think about here, because I've been in this world of trying to manage across these things, is what would it look like if we packaged it? And specifically, what if we looked at packaging platform APIs in the same way that we're able to bootstrap and package web APIs? If we think about the idea of writing a web application completely from scratch, that seems almost insane these days. Of course, you're going to pick your favorite coding language, pick your favorite framework, and use their CLI tool to bootstrap you a web API that you can just add a new endpoint to, right? What would that look like in platform engineering? Well, that is the framework that we are talking about within platform engineering and that I'm building with Cradix, with the team behind Cradix. What this does is it creates those APIs that allows for application teams to call in from wherever they want to, whether that be directly to Kubernetes or through some of the amazing portals that are out there, through CLIs and so on. We also are then allowing that API to manage business logic that can be that can be supported by the specialists in your team and result in management of whatever infrastructure you have. It's not just Kubernetes infrastructure, similar to how the control plane for Crossplane allows you to speak out to any infrastructure. This allows you to schedule to anything. So, what does this look like? I'm glad you asked. We're going to do a quick demo. So, switch screens here real quick. And I have got a little demo script here that will do all the typing for me because I'm just not that good at live typing. Let's be honest. No one wants to spend time at that. So what this script is doing, or the first thing that we're going to do is show what we look like when we're trying to implement those contracts using code. We probably get started with some Terraform, similar to this S3 bucket Terraform, obviously far more complex in your home environments, where you're codifying key aspects like your tagging strategy and privatizing of the buckets. We realize that that's a lot of complexity for people to manage. So we start modularizing it so that users can get behind just having to look at this. And not only does it get rid of some of the complexity, you can notice that when you're calling to the module, you don't have the ability to change the ACL, to change it from being private, because that's something that's important for the organization to keep. But we've decided that we need to change our implementation. We need to change our infrastructure as code. And we want to start using the reconciliation aspect of crossplay. We want to start introducing that. So all of a sudden, our teams no longer are going to be producing a simple contract like this. They now just need to produce a simple contract like this. Pretty simple, still an abstraction, but now we're asking them to change tools. And for some of their projects, they're going to still be in Terraform and some going to be in Crossplane. Is that how we want to evolve and introduce new ideas? Or do we want to introduce an API? So I've got Cradix up and running, and I'm going to introduce this S3 promise. What this promise does is it provides S3 as a service on demand. It provides that all encompassing API service, and business logic. You can see at first it comes up as unavailable when I go look at what promises are installed. And that's because what we need to do is make sure that we've set up our organization to be able to support this as a service capability. We do that through running some workflows, some business logic. When those workflows are done, we now have an available bucket as a service that people can request. Now, I say we have available. This is all done using GitOps, and our good friend Argo has a 3-minute reconciliation loop that I'm just going to go kick real quick to make sure that we have what we need. So this is all running behind the scenes as Argo. And when I refresh this, what you'll see is that we change from having one thing installed to having 3 things. That's because with that promise installation, we had to install the permissions for this platform to run Terraform. So we now have that cluster role and that cluster role binding, and we're ready to go. So as a user, I want that really simple abstraction, and I have it. It's the same as that kind of abstraction from Terraform modules or from Crossplane claims, but it's done in front of any decisions around the infrastructure as code that you're using or implementations that you're using. So I'm going to make a request directly to Kubernetes here for a resource request. And that is going to do exactly what the promise did. It's going to tell me that, hey, I'm working on it. I'm trying to do that, but there's some process involved with creating this. It's then going to run a workflow that's been defined by the platform. And we can see this is taking a little bit more time. This one hasn't finished yet. So we're going to jump in and look at the logs quickly to see why that's the case. So I'm using a tool called Stern. That's a fantastic add-on to kubectl that allows you to kind of follow different containers and different clusters. So this is us running Terraform. So it's actually already done. But you can see that when this workflow is the business logic, this is the things that you can do imperatively. You can call out to APIs. You can wait for approval on certain aspects. You can do anything business oriented here that you need to. And with that being complete, if I go and I look at I think I messed up my little script here. If I go look, the promise would be, or the bucket would then be healthy. But the key part here is I now have the ability to revolutionize how we run the implementation behind the platform, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to evolve from using one infrastructure as code tool, Terraform, to using another one, which is Crossplay. And so what I'm doing here is I'm diffing 2 files, which show you that the workflow, the business logic of using Terraform requires all sorts of things like permissions to run that Terraform. And the business logic behind Crossplane is using those claim YAMLs into Kubernetes to run. This is the difference that I'm implementing. The other thing that I'm diffing between the 2 implementations is how we're calling the container. In order to change all that logic, the only difference that's happening is I'm changing from calling a Terraform resource configure image to one that's for Crossplane, right? So I'm going to apply that difference, apply that new promise, and I can see that I've configured it. So if you're familiar with kubectl, this is not creating something new. It's actually updating it. And I can see that by updating that promise, I'm rolling out that change to everywhere that I need it. So I've rerun that configure workflow for the promise. So I've updated how that platform delivers buckets, but I've also updated each of the buckets that were already running. So at this stage, that bucket has been transformed from being controlled by Terraform to being controlled by Crossplane. And this is a pretty kind of common experience, right? We want to change our implementation, whether it be within a single tool or across tools. But it's not just about being able to update the technology we're using. This would be also how I would introduce an upgrade. If I wanted to upgrade the minimum version of a database that we're running in our environment because there were security issues, I can roll that out using this workflows process behind this API. And the users are just getting back what they need, which is the connection strings to the databases, the URLs for the test environments, and so on. I'm just at time now, so I'm going to hold off on the remainder of the fleet upgrade demos here, and just say that what we're talking about here is unleashing both sides by having an API between the creators and the users of technology. So when we're building our platforms, I beg us not to give up on revolution. Sometimes we can be tired and want to do that, but don't also forget that long tail. Always be building for day 2. Always be finding ways to introduce new patterns without that rewrite. You'll get more room to work if you do work that way. Decouple that implementation from the user experience, and keep in mind that every tool has its lifespan. So how do you as a platform take ownership of the business value that you're trying to provide and not the implementation of the tools that will obviously evolve with the industry? So these were some of the tools I used, and I'm going to quickly go to the next one, which has a link to the slides. So if you want to see more of those tools, you can see them there.
I love it. I love that you have these slides pointing to it. That's perfect. Do you want to leave that up for a minute to so people
I don't know if people can get their cameras out that fast.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I did. I stopped the present, didn't I? Sorry about that.
You went really, really
cool.
quick on it. Let's see.
I think it's coming back. Should be coming back. Yeah.
Let me find it. Okay. So we'll leave it up for a second. Thank you so much for that talk.
Yeah, and when you get a chance in the chat afterwards, if you want to put a link to the platforms, the working group, where you want people to come in and contribute and join. And I remember I think it was Will that made the point on stage at KubeCon about you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to be being the one who's writing all the code. Like everybody can contribute something. And in fact, if you're very new to this, like I think William had just joined it right before KubeCon. And when you're the new one, it's like you're the one everybody wants the opinion from because you're coming with fresh ideas, you're coming from the outside. So Abby can tell us all where we go to join so we can get more involved, and you can put those links in the chat. And that was super, super awesome. And also thank you, Chris, for jumping in with a lot of real world life stories that were validating the things Abby was saying as Abby was saying them. I don't know if you noticed that, Abby, but our keynote speaker from later on today was sharing some personal stories. So that is very awesome. Thank you for that.
Well,
thank you.
So I'm going to remove the slides now. Abby, thank you so much again for joining us. It's always a pleasure to see you and have you impart your wisdom.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun to share, and looking forward to keeping the conversation going. I'll be hanging out the rest of the day in the chat. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.